everybody. This is Maha.
And this is Dylan.
We're the hosts of See, That Wasn't Too Hard. In today's episode, we're going to talk about change agents. Isn't that right, Dylan?
Heck yes.
Heck yes. Are you ready, Dylan?
I am so ready.
Let's get started.
I have noticed, Maha, in my career that many people want to create good change. And the number of good changes that actually succeed is substantially lower than, what's envisioned. Mm-hmm. What do you think is the top way that change agents fail in organizations?
Well, Dylan, when you think about it, change agents have this innate drive in them to see better, to make the world a better place. And that's why they are actually driven by this change. The interesting thing about it, though, is that because we want to see things become better, we sometimes even want to rush it a bit too soon. And people are not always happy when you rush them into change for various reasons. So one of the reasons why change agents sometimes fail has nothing to do with their competency, has nothing to do with their solution, let's say, or has nothing to do with their ability to find the root cause. It actually has to do with their ability to garnish influence and their ability to bring people with them together towards that change, which, funny enough, takes time.
Ah, okay. So you're saying people rush, and rushing doesn't help, doesn't bring people along with them.
I mean, not at all. I mean, think about what change actually does to people. It makes them feel insecure. It questions their reality. And it also even questions their competency in some cases, especially when you're thinking about working in organizations, right? So you're dealing with so many uncertainties that by pushing them towards change, they're actually going to just push back and just move against it, which is why there's sometimes a lot of resistance to change.
Yeah. Okay. So if I see problems and I want to make a change, I want to change the way my organization works. Tell me more about like how doing it too fast will cause more problems. You mentioned people are going to be resistant and defensive. What else?
So Dylan, something interesting about pushing people too quickly, too soon, is that you probably in your mind as change agent have a solution already on hand. You probably have figured out the problem. You probably figured out the solution. So what's the first thing that you're going to do? You're going to just talk about it. You're going to tell people what the problem is. You're going to tell them why this is such a big problem. You're going to tell them how the solution that you have in mind is such a great solution. And you're just going to think that, wow, that's going to surprise them. But what does it actually really do in this case? It does a few different things, interestingly enough. One of them, obviously, is what we just talked about with going too fast, right? People are going to be afraid. There's this fear of change that is going to really slow people down, especially if it's coming from a person who, like them, should be fearing change. So
what does fearing change mean?
So this is kind of the interesting thing too. A lot of people talk about fear of change. What is it? Fear of change can actually show up in 3 different ways. You can actually feel the actual fear, not feel, excuse me, but also feel the actual change, which is something uncertain, something unknown, and something that you may not be able to measure against, which makes it seem devious and makes it seem bad. So in a lot of cases, fear of change is driven by that. On the other hand, fear of change could also mean that you're fearing what could actually potentially come and how it impacts you as a person, i.e., is this going to affect my way of working? Am I about to be rendered useless? or render it unimportant? Are they going to fire me, basically? So your fear of change is not just a fear of change in itself. It's a different sort of trigger that triggers different uncertainties, different heuristics, and different fears in a person that might actually drive the solution south. So Dylan, the interesting thing about fear of change is that what is actually changing in this case, right? So there is a change in the way that you're doing things. There is a change in the environment completely into something that you're not 100% even sure how that's going to look like in the future. There's a change that triggers your insecurities a little bit. Will I be able to survive in this new environment? Will I be able to do well? Am I still going to be valued as an employee, for example, or am I still going to be valued as part of the team if this change is to occur? So fear of change actually is, interesting enough, then a trigger to different fears, different insecurities, and then different aspects that actually impact the person, the environment, and then impact also the company.
All right. So tell me more about how people's fear of change in these three methods can negatively impact someone trying to enact change. Make that real for us.
So let's talk about, for example, a change in a CRM system. Let's think about, for example, you've been using a very archaic system for quite a while. Your team is obviously used to it and everything else. And suddenly you want to give them the big new shiny Salesforce. So what's going to happen? First of all, this is a new system that they don't know or don't understand yet how that's going to impact the system, how that's going to impact the company. So they actually fear what it's going to do. Is it really going to be successful when this tool when the tool that you previously had has been successful for so long? On another part about it as well is that you have people that have been using that archaic system forever. So they will even ask themselves the question of, will I be able to handle the new system? Will I be able to still get my reports, still do my work? Oh no, will I actually still be able to do my work and do my job? Am I still needed? And that actually is a little bit of some of the triggers or some of the kind of downward spiral conversation that sometimes you have in your head as an employee when you hear that there's a new CRM system coming in. Obviously, in a lot of cases, you are actually happy probably that there's a new CRM coming in because you think that it's going to help do your job better and everything else like that. But if a change agent doesn't utilize and doesn't steer a lot of people towards that positive side and positive kind of aspects of change, you will end up losing people towards the negative aspect of insecurity, fearing for their jobs, and then also fearing for, well, the change in their environment that's potentially going to come up. And let me tell you another thing as well, Dylan. As you can imagine, when I just gave you these lists of things that just pop up into your mind, as what change actually also then overwhelms your system. So if you're talking too much and if you're giving too much too early, too soon, you might actually be overwhelming individuals and overwhelming employees as well by giving them a little bit of too much information and maybe too much information for them to handle when it comes to making the decision of, well, is this then a good CRM for us?
Gotcha. So if you've got it all planned out in your head and you know everything, that even if you're the most brilliant person in the room and you know everything that they're going to be concerned with and you have an answer for it all, and you just start like explaining it all, you have to wait for them to think of all their concerns and then tie it back to your considerations. Because if you just keep going, they're going to get lost and they're just going to have bad feelings about the whole thing. Is that
pretty much actually?
Okay.
So
fair enough.
So let's talk about it then a little bit too, because a lot of change agents, again, have that desire and have that kind of direction towards the solution, to the point where sometimes they lose out on taking people through the same steps that they've actually went through. So interestingly enough, if you're just going to, well, I do this as well. And I think a lot of people who are change agents do this, come into a meeting guns blazing. This is the solution. This is how we're going to do it. And this is going to be good for us. You're not really taking people through the thing step by step. So you end up overwhelming them. By overwhelming them, they start making either their own decisions and their own kind of ideas on how things run. And at the same time, you might get like a little bit of an anchoring effect where they just say, no, well, this is the initial information, or this is the initial CRM that I have, and I don't actually need this new thing. So you end up actually playing on a lot of their biases, and you overwhelm them, and you overwhelm their decision-making system by not doing that. So
tell me more about how giving too much information can devalue you, the change agent.
So Dylan, I would actually say that you're devaluing three parts in this conversation. You're devaluing yourself as the sender, you're devaluing the message in itself, and then you're devaluing the value or the receivers as well. On one hand, you're kind of devaluing yourself because you're suggesting that there is nothing to you beyond the information that you provided. And it actually then, it makes you look like you're unimportant, and it diminishes even your role within something like the change in itself. Sometimes holding things for yourself and slowly trickling it down is actually a way of not only showing value, but a way of continuously being involved in something like that. You need, it's human nature. You need to show yourself as something valuable for you to be able to be part of something. So if you really want to drive change, you got to keep yourself valuable, because you got to keep yourself as part of that change.
Okay.
On the other hand, as well, when you're just taking something and you're just giving it for free to someone, naturally the human sense, the human self, just doesn't add the same value to something that is earned versus something that is just given. If someone just gives you something, you just throw it around in the house, it's fine. But if you had to work hard to get something, then you add a lot of value to it. And because you add a lot of value to it, you start protecting it, you start valuing it more and appreciating it more. On the other hand, as well, the receiver, when you're just there throwing something at them for free and looking like an empty shell because there's almost like nothing beyond the message that you've delivered, there's they're going to actually even devalue not only the message that they're receiving, like I said, but they might even devalue your importance in the role as well. So they may not eventually receive the message well, even if it's a good message, or they may not consider it as important, and hence why it eventually fails even.
What I have noticed sometimes is that when you come to someone with solutions, you're always trying to solution their problems. What you end up doing is sending a subtle signal that they cannot solve the problems themselves. And
that is true too. I forgot about that one.
So when you come with the whole answer and you're not interested in them helping, in them collaborating and being part of the solutioning process, it's a little dehumanizing and it's a little disrespectful. And so
not to all of us, which I will just put that on the table too.
Sure. I mean, some people have awareness and can rise above it, but there's this like fundamental risk.
Yeah, exactly.
When you come with the whole answer, you devalue the person you explain it to. There's already like a
power dynamic, maybe
power dynamic, or some contention or disrespect that can get really intense fast because you don't. They might be resistant because they think that you're not acting in their best interest. They will quickly assume malice because they hear disrespect.
And we talked about it in the earlier stage as well of the session, where kind of it actually really does play on their insecurities. And at the same time, just like you said, it gives them a reason to, in this case as well. Even if it's like quite a minuscule disrespect on different levels, it could easily be aggravated because of that.
Second, you devalue the idea because you are giving it away, and that tells the listeners that it doesn't have a lot of value. This has a name, the sunk costs fallacy. You can read about it in Kahneman's book, I'm pretty sure.
Thank you for reminding me of that word.
Third, you devalue the person because you are not bringing them along for the ride, and you send a signal of disrespect that their participation is not valued or needed. Mm-hmm. Those are all pretty high barriers, yes, to say nothing of the first two we discussed earlier.
Yep.
Okay, so giving too much too quickly, bad idea. All right, Maha, $1 million question. So what do you do instead?
Okay, so let's go back to receiver message sender.
Okay, yeah, that's a great framework.
Okay, so on one hand, again, if you really want to drive change, learn to hold your tongue. Mm-hmm. Saying less is more, not only because you're adding more value to yourself as an individual in this case, but because you also create this almost FOMO of people wanting to know more. Mm-hmm. So this desire for them to know more turns into a more that curiosity, that human curiosity. Actually, you could utilize that to drive the message forward. That's so again, the whole like saying less is more is really important, because not only do you continue to add value to yourself as an individual, but you also kind of rebalance that level of respect, because what that is going to help you do is move to the next step, which is inquiry. Again, that disrespect kind of thing, or just that element of disrespect that we talked about could be minuscule, but it really deteriorates trust in a lot of different things. So what you want to do is you want to get people involved. So you switch from shutting up mode to inquiry mode. And as you inquire and as you ask more questions and as you get people more involved, obviously you could ask leading questions because you know where you're going, but ask open-ended questions first, leading questions later. And then through managing that, you're not only building trust and respect, but you're also allowing yourself a chance to listen as well. Mm-hmm. And it's really hard to listen when you already know the answers. But once you go into that inquiry mode, it becomes easier to listen.
I think for many people who want to champion change, they get really frustrated by wasting their time and by listening to people with bad ideas, and just like they're waiting for this person to shut up. And I mean, in truth, a lot of people have a lot of bad ideas. But you point out that it's not necessarily, you're not going to change your idea. Their input isn't going to make the idea better necessarily. You hear that a lot, but it's their input is going to give you valuable information to explain how the solution works well, or to sell the idea, to educate people about the value of it.
Yep.
There's another side that you spoke to where, okay, so what you remind me of is I saw a model of teaching or of like, I don't know, hold on, let me say it again.
Coaching as well.
I saw a model once for two different ways of teaching. And one model is solutioning, where you hear a problem and you're like, will this work? Will this work? Will this work? How about this? What if we did this instead? This is a mode that most of us are pretty comfortable with. And
brainstorming.
Well, no, you're coming up with solutions. Okay. You're solutioning
Mhm.
what they're talking about.
Okay.
And there's another model, which is advising.
Mm.
Okay. So in solutioning, the goal is to find a solution.
Mhm.
In advising, your goal is not to find a solution, it's to help the other person become better
At finding the solution.
at solutioning, right?
Yep.
And so in an advising, you're asking, well, what about this? How are you going to deal with this?
Mhm.
What's this person going to think of that idea? You're helping them build a solution. And they in this model, the way it was presented, they were saying like usually bosses should be doing the advising and the direct reports should be doing the solutioning. And yeah, I suppose, but I think that if you do more advising, even if you have a perfect solution in your head and you know where this is going to land, if you
We do
approach
it right.
things from the advising side, they're going to come up with the solution. And if their solution is bad, you're going to point it out in a soft way. But they're going to go through the struggle of, man, solutioning is hard. And they're going to be eager, even if
To
either
deliver.
they get to the right answer
Mhm.
or they give up. And both are a win for you. Because if they get to the right answer, hooray! And you've like they've come up with it and you don't have to sell it.
Mhm.
If they give up, you can say, well, what about this? And they look, my goodness, that will work.
Mhm.
And you win too.
I never thought about the giving up thing, by the way. So thank you for that.
I mean, this isn't going to work with everybody because, some people are malicious, but if you do,
I've seen people go with the wrong answer anyway. So this.
Well, right. Yeah. But I think a lot of that is wrapped up in the defensiveness that you described earlier. And
Exactly.
people are just like the tribalism, the sides, and the winning is more important than the effectiveness of the solution. But I think within this model, the advising and the asking questions seems to be the approach that you're advocating here. Like that's always the way you should be doing it.
Yep. I'm just thinking a lot, to be honest, because I'm thinking about a lot of situations where that could have been quite beneficial. I think
Sure.
the eagerness to see change just pushes you to, I want to do it now. I want to do it now. And slowing it down is just too valuable of a solution for it.
Right. Yeah.
Man, I had some interviews that even could have went a different path if I just slowed down. Because I was so eager on helping this company figure out A, B, C, and D that they haven't figured out yet, that I just didn't think about it. So that was actually so interesting enough. The recording for today was a realization that I've had in 2022, just January 2022. And it's been a quite tremendous change for me. And I really appreciate this.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad. For all our listeners, there's a terrible temptation to be ashamed of growth. And we never say it that way. Mm-hmm. But when you realize something that was painful for you, that like held you back before, you're then ashamed. You think, man, I wish I knew that. I wish I had done better. No, celebrate the realization when it does come. And there's a terrific XKCD about this, about like Mentos and Coke or something like this. But and we'll put it in the comments.
Sure.
But I think this topic alone about how to be a smoother change agent is not a very common skill set. This is something that I think most people go through life without figuring out.
And I'm actually gonna even do something in the side comments as well. There is a TED talk that I actually bumped into about actually in December last year by a change agent who was trying to even change the CIA.
Sure. Yeah.
And she couldn't do that, not because she wasn't proficient, but because she was pushing too soon and she didn't understand her position of power and how she could actually change that.
Right.
She calls herself an organizational heretic. Her name is Carmen Medina, and she's amazing.
Yeah. There's this idea that I think we often are impatient with our improvement and our growth. And often the improvement and growth of the organizations that we're part of. And
exactly.
We need to recognize that sometimes that things take time. You hear it a lot, but just changing minds sometimes takes time. You gotta expend a lot of influence and a lot of steady pushing, a lot of questions, and sometimes you just can't hurry the process. And it is what it is. But if you rush it, you often
lose
do not go any faster. Right? You just lose it entirely.
Yeah, you lose it. For me, it's not about like if you just push it, you're basically pushing it off an edge and you lose it. You gotta slowly ease it. And this is kind of interesting because in a lot of organizations, even some of that I've interviewed in Germany, for example, they want to see a change happen in 2 months.
Yeah.
Or in a month or in a week or something like that. And I keep telling them that's impossible, but it was always an interesting discussion about it. If you push it, you're pushing it off the edge, and you're leaving a lot of things in the back of it untied, basically, a lot of loose ends that are just going to catch up to you eventually as well.
This has been a fascinating topic. I really appreciate the insights, Maha. I think that this is probably a skill that, like communication, it's going to be ongoing growth for at least me and probably everybody.
Myself too, to be honest.
Right, exactly.
Thank you for our listeners. And if you like our content, don't forget to click like, subscribe, or even leave us a comment or leave us any sort of message on even LinkedIn. We'd really appreciate it. If you have any feedback or if you've ever gone into a situation like that, tell us your story. We'd be more than happy to hear it. We'll be more than happy to talk to you too. And until then, Dylan, see, that wasn't too hard.
That wasn't too hard.
There you go.